Welcome to Healing the Tigress, a podcast of stories and conversations on Asian American Pacific Islander maternal mental health. We are your hosts, Peggy, a licensed clinical social worker and certified breastfeeding peer counselor.
And Jasmine, a clinical pharmacist with a perinatal mental health certification. Both of us are Taiwanese American mothers and survivors of postpartum depression and anxiety.
We don't know about you, but we didn't grow up talking much about mental health in our families, and we want to change that now that we are mothers.
Together, with our clinical backgrounds and passion on the subject, we want to create a safe space for the AAPI community to discuss perinatal mental health issues.
And together, we want to break generational cycles in our own parenting journeys so that we can heal our inner tigress, a nod to the tiger moms before us. We are so happy you're tuning in here. Let's get started. Welcome back, listeners, for the month of May, which is Maternal Mental Health Month and Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and in which Mother Day falls. We are going to celebrate with more episodes this month. So you can tune in more this month as we bring you some maternal mental health topics we haven't touched on before and some exciting AAPI guests. For today's episode, we don't actually have a guest, but we will be focusing on another aspect of Jasmine's story that often gets a lot of resonance from other moms, the topic of postpartum insomnia. In the future, we hope to invite a sleep expert on the show, but today we will just explore how Jasmine overcame her sleep issues after having a baby. So Jasmine, I know you've talked about your story before on our podcast and some others, as well as in blogs, but I think the sleep part would love to dive into that and hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when I talk about my postpartum depression story, like everywhere, I can't leave out this insomnia piece because I often attribute a lot of the spiral to two big factors. And one was breastfeeding, struggling with that. And the second was this postpartum insomnia piece, which I thought I was sort of maybe it was making it up because if you Google postpartum insomnia, it's not really going to come up, or it's not really a true diagnosis. And a few months ago, I was actually on Rachel Shepard-Odud's podcast, No One Told Us. And I talked about how I felt very unseen in my problems over the lack of sleep. And you wouldn't believe how many responses I actually got back from moms telling me, oh my God, that's how I felt. And no one understood how bad the insomnia was. And so I feel like every time I share about this, I get someone that goes, oh my God, no one could describe this, or no one could relate. And I actually, this is something apparently that's common. So, when I was going through it myself, I would have given anything just to hear another mom, any mom, tell me and confirm that I wasn't the one going crazy, that insomnia was quote normal, or at least something that could have potentially happened. And so I think it's important that we're talking about this so people know that's, it's actually, it could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is, people, when you're having a baby, they're always like, oh, get some sleep now because you're not going to sleep later. And you hear that. And it's just so much part of that newborn culture. Oh, you're not going to sleep. But there's something so different about you're not going to sleep versus full on insomnia.
Right.
What would you say your expectation of sleep was before, when you were going into pregnancy? Because I think you mentioned before you'd never had insomnia before, right?
No. Yeah. I feel like I've had pretty good sleep all my life. And going into pregnancy, even during pregnancy, I actually felt like I slept more because I was always tired. Until maybe the very end of pregnancy, when you're just so big, you're uncomfortable all the time. But even then, I feel like I was very lucky that I didn't really have that much issues. And people would tell me, yeah, you're enjoy now, just like you said, enjoy it now. And sometimes I felt maybe it was a joke. Other times it almost felt like people were just sort of waiting for you to crash and sort of see on the other side of it. I'm that's not very helpful the way you're saying that or phrasing that. It's almost like they want to watch you suffer. And so sometimes I feel like I would take that kind of and retort back oh no, I'll be fine. I went into it thinking like, well, when I was in pharmacy school during those years, I worked part-time. I was, president or I held a lot of extracurricular activities outside of school, on top of being a full-time student and studying for my midterms and stuff. So I survived on average 4 hours of sleep a night
Mm-hmm.
during those grad school years. And so I thought, man, this is like piece of cake. 4 hours of sleep a
Right.
night on average. I can handle that if this is what it's going to be like. And I do remember my brother-in-law actually told me, yes, but 4 hours of sleep in broken chunks, half an hour
Mm,
here, an hour there, it takes its toll. Like it's not the
right.
same thing as getting 4 hours of sleep in like one solid chunk, which is really hard to come by when you have a newborn. And I think
Right.
that's the part that I didn't understand or felt very, I don't know, in hindsight, I was probably very arrogant about it or just like, no, I've survived that. I'll be fine. And
Mm-hmm.
come, on the other side, truly humbled, like, oh my God, this is what he was talking about.
Right.
Um, and then, not even just being so tired from pumping, feeding, triple feeding, those kinds of things. And then not being able to fall asleep
Mm-hmm.
after that, when you had the opportunity and chance to sleep. I think that was like probably really hard for me to like feel like, oh my God, am I broken now? Like how come I
Mm,
can't fall asleep? And I had a mom friend who she was like, we gave birth kind of around the same time. And we would sometimes compare, like, oh, how are you doing? How's your baby doing? How are you doing? And she would say, like, oh, and I'd be like, how's your sleep? Like, how are you sleeping? And she would say, oh my God, like as soon as my head touches the pillow and my mom's here to take over, I would just fall asleep. And to me, I was like, oh my God, like, why can't I fall asleep
right.
the minute my head touches the pillow? I want to because I'm exhausted. I feel like so exhausted to the bone. And yet, for some reason, my brain's like overactive and overthinking during this time that I can't. And so that was really, you start playing that comparison game very early on, I
Yeah.
think.
I think a huge difference too, that you look at your college days, your grad school days, like your brother-in-law said, it's like I'm staying up till 2 a.m. working on this, whatever, and then I go to sleep and I wake up at 6 for some reason or whatever, right?
Right.
But what's also happening that we've talked about before is your depression and your anxiety. And there's
Mm-hmm.
also like, I wonder, and maybe we don't know, but when you look back on that time, when you said you couldn't sleep, it's because, was it because the anxiety in your mind, when you say your mind is going mild, then was it the anxiety? And I feel like I know what you're going to say because you don't know, but like the depression, was it depression, anxiety, then the insomnia, or was it the insomnia and the depression? Do you even remember in that haze? Really, it's hard to look back and dig that, but like all
Yeah.
of that was going together. What was that like too?
Yeah, I often think a lot of it was chicken or the egg, like what happened
Mm-hmm.
first, because for me, like that first month was just such a whirlwind of issues with myself, the breastfeeding, the latching. We had so many appointments for me and my daughter. I had mastitis within the first 2 weeks. And then I'd also developed like ulnar nerve damage in my hand pretty early on. So the hard part, and so I don't know if that triggered it too, because when you have physical problems, it affects your mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when my hand started developing like this numbness and tingling, I would feel I would feel the tingling and numbness the most when I was
Mm-hmm.
lying still. And so I think that was hard is when I was trying to get rest, when I was trying to lie down to sleep, then I started noticing that tingling in my hands, rating up to my elbow, up to my shoulder. And I think that's when your mind starts going overactive. Like, what's that feeling? Is it getting worse? Is it getting
Mm-hmm.
better? I'm trying to assess. And then I'm thinking, is my other hand feeling the same thing? And then I think I started on top of all the other things I was already anxious about, with feeding and sleeping with my baby. I started wondering like, oh my God, I'm spiraling and thinking what's going to happen with my arms? Because if I can't use my arms, I can't hold my baby. I can't pick
Mm-hmm.
her up. I can't do my job in the future. Like, I think I started very early on sort of catastrophizing. And I don't know if that was the start of postpartum anxiety, which
Mm-hmm.
then sort of spiraled into depression. Like a lot of those, anxiety, depression are like you always say, two sides of the same coin. So sleep deprivation and insomnia, which I've learned, really exacerbates that and makes that worse. And then I mentioned this sometimes in my blog, but I had this period of time, and this was also early on, where my husband allowed me time to sleep in our bedroom. He said, I will do the night feeds. I will take care of the baby. You just rest in your other room and try to sleep on your own. And there was a period of pretty much almost 48 hours, almost 2 days, where we were going through this cycle where I was just trying to sleep. And I was so anxious about being able to fall asleep. I basically did nothing for those 2 days except try to sleep. And my mother-in-law would come over and be like, oh, go rest. The baby's here. Or I'm here. Sorry, not baby's here. I'm here. I'll take care of the baby. Or I'll relieve your husband. And, they basically took shifts while they were like, just try to sleep. Don't be pressured to sleep, or or try the best you can. And then oh my God, there was just all this pressure to try to fall asleep. And in those 48 hours, I could not fall asleep. And it's not for lack of opportunity, which is kind of what you have to define insomnia, right? Insomnia is not the fact that you just can't fall asleep because, you maybe don't have time. Given the opportunity to sleep, you can't. And the other thing is, technically, I don't think clinically I can call this insomnia, because I think it has to be this isn't happening for 3 times a week for 3 months or something. I didn't have 3 months for myself to diagnose that. I already knew early on this was not happening. I was not sleeping or falling asleep. So in those 48 hours where I couldn't fall asleep, I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like I was losing my mind, and just felt very disconnected to my body, and wondering what was wrong with my body, that maybe something was truly broken inside of me. And during those times, I think you start thinking the worst things about yourself. You start having intrusive thoughts. You start wondering am I really going crazy? And one of the things, I don't know if I ever talked about this before, was during that time, I felt like I was hearing sounds. There was this weird, I would be lying in bed and I would hear this beeping noise. It sounded almost like an alarm that was going off, but it wasn't in our house. It sounded like it was coming from outside of our house. And I told my husband, I was like, do you hear this sound? I bring him into the bedroom. I'm like, do you hear this? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I literally thought I was going crazy and hallucinating. Fast forward a year and a half later, we're in bed, finally sleeping together again. And I'm like, oh my God, do you hear that beeping? He's like, oh yeah, that's the weird maintenance closet that the HOA, whatever, has outside. And I was like, I wasn't going crazy.
Yeah, thank God.
There was really a beeping. There was really a beeping noise outside. But in that period, I felt like I couldn't trust my body, and I couldn't trust the senses and everything and stimulation that was coming in. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I don't know what came first. All of this was this sort of superstorm that all happened at the same time, which I think is what drove my depression really, really bad. And after that period of 48 hours, and even after the 48 hours, I didn't get restful sleep, whatever sleep I did get. So I think during that period, it really started setting in the depression, where I started having this mindset of, oh my God, I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to sleep again. There's no light at the end of this tunnel. What did I do to myself? If I can't even sleep, I can't take care of my baby. And this is what I've learned about the insomnia portion, that catastrophizing, that sleep worry, that you're thinking ahead. If I don't get sleep tonight, I'm not going to function tomorrow. That sort of anxiety that carries over, that further drives and messes with your sleep. So It makes it even harder. And you come to associate your bed and your bedroom and sleep with all this frustration and
anxiety.
Worry.
Yeah. It becomes a trigger because you're like, oh my gosh, I have to go to bed. And it's interesting because when you mentioned that, I was like, oh, I remember feeling, while I didn't have full-blown insomnia, because my baby would wake up so frequently, I remember getting ready for bed and having anxiety and feeling panic because I was like, I don't want to go another night where I just keep waking up and feeling really anxious about the thought of going to sleep. I was sleeping in chunks, I got some chunks, but I remember thinking that too of oh my gosh, getting ready for bed gave me so much anxiety because I knew that it meant a night ahead of constantly waking. And so these things end up having these associations, and I think we can also talk a little bit more about how that looks for you, after you recovered too.
Right.
And I think also when we think about the chicken and the egg. I think you're right. I think it doesn't have to be so linear, like this came first and then this. I'm sure it was all happening all at the same time, which
Right.
probably made it worse, right? It's like you were already experiencing depression and anxiety, which could cause insomnia, but the insomnia it's a cycle, right? Like
Yes.
then the insomnia
feeds
is
on it.
exactly like it's like this monster that's eating its tail or whatever, right? Like then the insomnia is it doesn't make your depression anxiety any better, and then you have the body changes, right? You have the ulnar nerve damage, mastitis is not comfortable. And then, some other things we were looking at when it comes to insomnia during postpartum too is like also if you're breastfeeding and the nutrition, like are you getting enough food? Are you like extra hungry? Are you extra thirsty? And then also just hormonal changes like the decrease in progesterone and melatonin in the fourth trimester. So it's a perfect storm for you to not get sleep, and it's hard though, because one thing I keep hearing you say is like you kept asking if you were broken, even though this logically is why you're not getting sleep right now. This logically is why you're feeling this way. But you didn't have that like frame of reference to be like,
No.
That's why the podcast you're on is called No One Told Us, right?
I
like,
know.
No one told you.
Right.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we can start to talk a little bit about what you did to get sleep. What helped? What started to help for you?
It took a while. I felt like the sleep piece was the last piece to get better for me in terms of all of it. And one of the things, like you're talking about this right now, right? All these reasons your sleep could be imbalanced and messed up and harder to sleep overall. I think learning about that was helpful for me to recover in knowing that this wasn't my fault, that this was normal. To hear that this is like, okay, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. There's a reason this is happening. I think it's helpful to hear, but no one was really giving me that. The first nugget that I sort of like clung on to was my OB after my 6-week visit was like, I think you should see, a therapist or a psychologist or something. And like, I really didn't want to. And I finally just like, my husband was like, please just like try. I forced myself to see this person. And she like, I really didn't want to be there. It was my first time ever seeing a therapist. But one thing she did say that I did remember was she goes, that right now, postpartum, your body is changing everything. Like not even just the hormones that you're thinking about, like female hormones. Okay. Cause I was like, well, maybe just hormonal. Sure. She said, no, not even just that. Your cortisol levels are high. Your adrenaline levels are high. Your body went through a stressful thing. And she said, that takes a while to rebalance and come down. And she's like, you're a healthcare provider. You're a scientist. Like, do you remember that? And I'm like, no. It's like all out the window for me, right? When you're the patient, when you're like, I'm like, but it sort of rang a bell. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that was the first piece I got where I could sort of give myself permission not to be perfect. I mean, like it's weird to think about it that way, but I think for me, a lot of it was focused on like, why can't I do this right?
Right.
Maybe that goes back to sort of that Asian mentality, but that was sort of the first step, I think, is to sort of like honor that this is a normal process. And, I fumbled trying to get help and figuring what was going wrong. So as a pharmacist, I would, say, okay, well, I know XYZ medications. Let's ask the doctor or like, I think the first thing we tried was over the counter. So like, Benadryl, Benadryl maybe will knock me out. Nope. Did nothing. So then I went to my doctor and I was like, hey, can you prescribe me some trazodone? Of all options, I think this is probably safest, blah, blah, blah. She's like, oh, okay. So she prescribed it. I tried it for a night or two. I had this, what I thought was like an adverse reaction. I'm like, oh my God, my entire body is hot, feeling this tingling in my stomach. Like I feel like I'm on fire everywhere. And I was like, no. I'm having a side effect. I'm not taking this anymore. And so I kind of just like cycled through medications. I asked for like a benzo. I asked for like, all these things. I sort of went through the list and I was like, I refused to take like certain things I refused. I was like, she said, you want to try Ambien? I was like, no, that's one of the things I don't want because I was worried about being like addicted to it. So, all these things, sometimes like knowing too much is also a crutch.
Yeah.
Knowing too little can be harmful. It's hard to find that middle ground, almost like, And so I think finally it got to the point where my doctor was like, this is anxiety. You need to treat your anxiety so you actually do need to start that antidepressant, which my OB had suggested.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ugh, like, okay, I guess. But then I'm thinking, how soon can this be fixed if this is like an anxiety issue? Because I know these antidepressants are going to take 4 to 6 weeks. And I needed to be sleeping yesterday. I need something quick. And so that's why I kept going to certain options that I thought would, sleep meds that I thought would make me drowsy faster. And it just seemed like I was so anxious that either it wouldn't make me fall asleep fast enough, or if it did, I would wake up a few hours later and then worry about, oh my God, am I going to fall back asleep? Can I fall back asleep now that I've woken up? I'd start like tracking, oh my God, I only got 3 hours this chunk, which I mean, to technically a newborn parent, you're like, wow, 3 hours is great. In my head, I was thinking, my husband is giving me all this time to sleep. I should be able to sleep a 7-8 hour chunk because I'm given this time, and yet I'm not able to accomplish that, which made me kind of feel more guilty that like, why am I complaining about this? Why am I still like failing at this? I'm giving all this time. So I think that guilt also played a feedback loop into the depression. And so what finally worked was, I think, trusting to be on that antidepressant when the doctor was finally like, you need to take it. Like, you need to take this. We need to find the right dose for you. We're going to get you there. And I often talk about this one psychiatrist I finally was able to see who sort of helped me, because she said, like, after the first time I met her and told her my story, I finally felt like she, at the end of it, like before I left, she said, Jasmine, I'm going to get you to sleep. And I don't know what that's going to look like, or what, how it's going to work out, but we're going to find something that works. And finally, when she said it like that, it wasn't like somebody that told me, no, we're going to fix your depression, we're going to fix your anxiety. She said, no, we're going to get you to sleep. And I finally felt like, oh my God, like, she gets it. She gets that this is the piece that's really, really like wedging everything in right now and getting like worsening things. And she's going to help me find that piece. So I finally trusted her. Like, I finally felt heard. And so she prescribed me to take Seroquel, or quetiapine. And I've never really talked about this before, but I don't mind sharing now, because I feel like a lot of people will ask me after they read my blog. They're like, okay, so what did you do? Like, what did, and a part of me, I feel like, has never, I keep wanting to write on my blog about it. I keep wanting to write on my newsletter about it, but there's this sort of perfectionistic like procrastination that's happening right now, that where I'm like, I need to do this justice. I need to like write it correctly. And the other thing is, maybe I think it brings back trauma to me to actually dive deep and like talk about this or write about it. But I think I've gotten to the point where I can. The Seroquel itself, and actually the very first psychologist I saw, she wanted to prescribe that too. And at that moment though, when I don't think she said specifically Seroquel, she said, well, how do you feel about an antipsychotic? And so Seroquel is technically in the class of medications that are considered second generation antipsychotics, which sounds bad when you say, I'm not psychotic. I don't want to take an antipsychotic when you put it that way. But it's in a class of medicine that's a mood stabilizer. So it's typically used for bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, but it can be also like add-on for depression. And off-label use, which I didn't even think about at that time, is it can be like at low doses. Higher doses are more for like the schizophrenia, bipolar. At low doses, it's very sedating, and so it can actually be used as an adjunct for sleep problems. Sometimes they'll use it in like elderly patients too, for like delirium or agitation. But I think for me, in the moment, I just felt very like, what is all this happening to me? Why do I need to be on a quote antipsychotic? And I think there was that stigma, that fear that like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Why do I need to do this? But looking back now, when my psychiatrist finally prescribed it, I was like, okay, I kind of like gave in. She's like, look, you know this, at low doses, it can make you fall asleep, and we'll titrate it to a point, and you don't have to be on this forever, right? We'll work through it. So our plan was to be on that on a daily basis at night. She really pushed for good sleep hygiene. People always talk about sleep hygiene, but she's like, look, no, you need a schedule. You need to follow it, okay? And, take this medicine like 45 minutes before you're going to go to bed. We also supplemented like melatonin on top of that. And we had a backup sort of like more quick acting sleeping pill. I think it was, no, I'm trying to think exactly which one. I think it was Lunesta. And she said, just in case, if you wake up and you're like panicking, you can take this. And so we had a plan set up in place. And the interesting thing was, the first night I took it, I was so drowsy. I was like, oh my God, I need to go to sleep. I fell asleep pretty quickly.
Wow.
When I woke up, I felt like maybe it wasn't the most restful sleep I got in a while, but it was a good like 4.5 hour chunk. I was like, all right, I'll take it, right? And it only sort of like increased from there on. I never had to take that backup pill. I had it there. It was always there waiting for me. But looking back, I never had to take it. And I think a lot of it was really that anxiety. So learning to work through that, I think sleep journaling was also a big help to be able to just write like a few sentences every day. Like, how was the quality of my sleep? How did I feel I did? Learning not to look at a clock. And just sort of trusting my body. And the other thing that was important is she said, if you can't fall asleep within the first 20 minutes or so, just get up. Go do something else. Don't let your bed become a source of frustration for you. So all these things I think were helpful in the long run. And yeah, I think actually by 5 months postpartum, she helped me wean off the Seroquel.
Wow. Okay. So you took it for a very short amount of time then too.
In retrospect, it wasn't even that long, right? I will have to say though, that the anxiety and sort of like almost like PTSD of that sleep anxiety lingered for quite a while. Even though I was off medications, every night when it came time to sleep, it was almost like, okay, here we go. How is tonight going to go? That persisted for a while.
And you were getting sleep by then though, right? Like it wasn't like you were really not sleeping, but you just had that preparatory anxiety of like as you get into bed and then you end up sleeping and you're fine. But there's just these moments right before that kind of triggers you of remembering. What did your psychiatrist say? Don't let your bed be
like a source of frustration.
Yeah, because it kind of did, right?
Yeah.
And then you would get in bed after the fact and feel very anxious. Yeah.
Those 48 hours where I couldn't sleep, I was lying in there for like majority of the day, just like, oh my God, like why is this not happening? And that was bad. That was really awful. Probably, that made it worse to do that. But I had to really relearn all these sleep hygiene things where I felt like when I was learning this in school, I just sort of brushed it off like, yeah. This is common sense stuff. Like everyone should know this. Like it's so easy. But to actually like truly practice it did take a lot more conscious effort. And so now I'm, very, very mindful of like, now I can like sort of fudge it a little bit. I think I've gotten to the point where I've recovered enough, but for a long time, I was very strict about, following. I remember there was one time where we went out to my mother-in-law's house for some sort of, birthday dinner or something. And my daughter was, she wasn't a year old yet, but, she was a little bit older at that point. And I remember just like, oh my God, we need to get home so I can get ready for my bedtime routine. Like, chop, because if I don't sleep, everything's going to be bad. So a lot of it was retraining my mind to trust my body again. And unfortunately, that took a while. But I think actually where I did finally have a breakthrough, because up until for quite a while, my doctor said, do not nap. That was a big thing. Do not nap. Even though people tell you nap when the baby sleeps.
Yeah.
It's not the best advice. I think if you are a good napper, if you are able to do it, sure, why not? For me, I've never been good at napping. I've never taken naps like all my life. I've been like the worst napper.
Oh, me neither. I don't know why. Yeah, I just can't nap.
Yeah. And so I think that, didn't come natural for me anyway. So she said, you know what? Consolidate all your sleep. You want to build up that sleep drive. That's what they call it. So, don't limit your caffeine, right? And I'm not a huge coffee drinker anyway. So she's like, absolutely just avoid all those things, alcohol, don't exercise right before bed, all those things, but do exercise because you want to, at least move your body. So yeah, I think all this sleep hygiene thing was really important to do. But I didn't nap basically for quite a while. And I was afraid to. Actually, I will have to say there was a part of me that was really anxious about the thought that maybe I'll never be able to nap again. And so all this whole time, I wasn't doing that until the therapist I had been seeing. So after I was connected with my psychiatrist, they also recommended I also see a regular therapist. And so my therapist actually, one day we were talking about, how the sleep anxiety thing still comes up for me. And she said, you know what? I think there's this trauma piece, right? And she said, I'm actually trained in EMDR. I was like, what's that? She's like, okay, well, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And she says, is this technique we can use to process a trauma, which might make it like easier for you to, and I don't think she like specifically said it'll make it easier for you to sleep. It was just more like maybe processing that trauma will help release something that will make you less anxious. Okay. And the way she described it, I was kind of like, okay, this sounds very hippy dippy, but all right, sure, I'll give it a shot. So after we did that EMDR session, I felt like I got the best night of sleep I had gotten, like the most restful night in 8 months, basically since I had the baby. And so I was really shocked. I was like, wow, like that session actually really helped. And then I think a week or so later, I accidentally fell asleep on the couch and took a nap while my baby was napping.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and that nap that I took, because I don't nap, right? But I guess I was just like, okay, feeling like in a safe enough space or restful enough space, or just I'm tired enough, maybe I'll close my eyes for a moment. It was maybe like a 20-30 minute nap. And I woke up and I was like, oh, like what happened? And I remember it was actually a day that my husband was at work. He actually took an unpaid leave for a while, but he would have to pop into work once every maybe 2 weeks to just make sure his benefits kept running. And so he was at work that day and I texted him. I said, I took a nap. And then I think he was somebody that could actually understand the gravity of that statement, because if I texted that to anybody else, they'd be like, okay,
good for you.
So what? So what? Yeah. And he was like, oh my God, you did? And so I just remember wow, it was like a big celebratory moment. Mm-hmm. And I think that EMDR session released something for me that helped, for further on. And from that moment on, I felt like, okay, I'm not broken. Mm-hmm. I can still fall asleep, or if I need to take a rest. And that almost felt like a big thing was lifted off my shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I've been noticing as you talk about just the treatment of the insomnia is it's so complex, right? Because it's not just the treatment of the sleep. It's not just take a pill, knock yourself out and wake up, because you tried that. Right. You tried it with the Benadryl, you tried it with the Trazodone, you tried all these things. It was so compounded with, you have to treat the anxiety, you have to treat the depression, you have to treat the trauma, you have to treat the sleep or the part of your brain. It was multiple layers of stuff to help you. And I think one thing that, and you were kind of mentioning this later too, because as I'm hearing you talk about the catastrophizing and the if this then that, the first thing that ran through my mind is, oh, CBT would be great for this, and there is a CBT for insomnia, right? Because so much of it is these thoughts that you were just perseverating and stuck on. I'm trying to remember if you did or didn't do CBT.
I didn't do CBT-I, but when I was researching about treatments and things like that, CBT-I did come up. You'd have to find somebody that was like CBT-I. It's CBT-I, so if you're looking for that credential, somebody who's trained in that would be able to help walk you through that. And I think even back during that time, I didn't really understand the benefit of CBT in general or therapy, like the different modalities and things like that. And then I think the pressure or sort of load that it felt like to find somebody that had this credential that my insurance would cover, it just felt very daunting. And I was like, okay, I'm already on a good path, but if I weren't, this would be a great option to pursue. And I have heard from people that CBT-I is great. It works very good. It's probably one of the gold line treatment standards for insomnia, because it doesn't really require medication. A lot of it is sort of the thought reprocessing and, of course, along with sleep hygiene and things like that. And I did have this mom follower who was super nice, and we were talking about the postpartum insomnia. She actually actually forwarded me some lesson plans of a CBT-I online course that she was taking. It was so nice of her to like send this stuff to me because she's like, I was like, I would love to learn more about it. She's like, here, you could just read my lesson plans and see what it looks like. I was like, oh, that's so sweet. So I did sort of peruse some of it a little bit, and it does sort of like teach you about sleep in general. Like, you know, what can you expect, right? It's actually very natural for us to wake up several times at night. You may not actually know you're waking up, but it happens. And so some people, it's easier for them to fall back to sleep if that happens. Other people might be like re-stimulated and things. So I think a lot of it is knowledge, right? Knowing also what to expect, what's normal, what's not, and then building from there on to retrain your body not to associate like that frustration in your bed. And so I think CBT-I can be very helpful, but they do also say if while you're leading up to a lot of this, you might need some help with medications, that's okay. It can be a temporary thing to like, you know, lead you into it. And then like me, like, you know, I weaned off of my medicine after a while. I was still working on things even off the medicine, but just because you're on medication, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It's actually probably can be helpful to like initiate things so that you're not so anxious. And I do think probably the antidepressant helped too. The thing with the Seroquel, I think for me, in conjunction with my Zoloft antidepressant, my doctor was like, well, you know, also it does also have serotonin properties or antagonism, and like it also works on dopamine. So, you know, it might have augmented my antidepressant too, on top of the benefits of being, it can help me fall asleep. So yeah, I think I would definitely recommend people to check out CBT-I if they're having issues. I also had tried, like I tried acupuncture, because some people are like, oh, if you do acupuncture, maybe it'll help you relax. It was the first time I'd ever done acupuncture. I'm like, I'm Asian. I've never done this before. It was so weird at first. You don't really feel the needles, but I have to say for me, it didn't really make me fall asleep, because some people are like, oh, I fall asleep during my acupuncture session, and maybe I had that anxiety, like, okay, am I gonna fall asleep, and I never did. But it did relax me, so I'm like, okay, no, it was worth a shot. Maybe it will help for some people, but yeah, for me it wasn't quite there.
Yeah. I think this is where it's also like everyone's insomnia experience is different. For some people, it might be, I just can't relax. So let's try that. And let's relax, right? For some people, it's the trauma. There's some sort of trauma associated. Like there's so many different components, the depression and the anxiety. So I think that like it does sound like you were just like, I need to try to sleep. Let me try all these things too, you know? Like
I did. I was definitely like a grab, like, okay, let me just like, you know, here's all my options. Let me just try this. But at the same time, I think my anxiety also kept me from sticking with something for a while, like just giving it time to work too. So who's to say that like maybe the trazodone wasn't a true side effect or reaction? I don't know. I just know in the moment I was like so caught off guard. I was like, no, I'm not ever doing this again. I was so worried about like addiction to a benzo that I was like, like maybe I shouldn't. So I think some of it is you have to let go of some of that to really let it work and try. Give it a few nights or so, and yeah, you know, it's chicken and the egg. Was it really the anxiety that I had to take care of first before the sleep medicine would work for me? I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's also where it's so important to have a really good relationship with a provider. Like you mentioned at one point, you're just like, I just had to trust her. And there's also for you, it's pretty unique because I feel like all your providers are like, well, you're a pharmacist, you know, and you're like, okay, can you stop just for once, just pretend I'm not a pharmacist, you know?
Exactly.
Like, I think that like, sometimes it helps to just pretend I am a regular person who knows nothing, but that's also hard because then they'll say, what about this? And you're like, well, that is a, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important for folks to know that for all of these things, not just the insomnia, not just the depression, anxiety, nothing goes away with a blink of an eye, right? Like we want, it's so hard because I know that we are like, I wanted to be sleeping yesterday. but like these things take time, you know, the healing takes time, even for you, like even after you were, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because by the time you were doing EMDR, were you off the sleep meds already? Or
I was off.
Right. Like
I was off the sleep meds. Yeah.
So like even after the initial sleep, it's like there can be these other pieces that you need to work on. And it's, again, to our listeners, it doesn't mean you're broken. Doesn't mean anything's wrong. Our bodies are just constantly changing, and having a child is one of the biggest changes your body could ever go through on so many levels, not even just physically, but mentally, and like everything that's going on. And to give yourself grace when it's like, how am I not like my friend whose head hits the pillow and she just is out, you know?
Yep.
When you did, you know, because the Seroquel you didn't take as long. I'm assuming you took the Zoloft a little longer than the Seroquel.
Yeah, the Zoloft I took for a year and a half, and I actually probably took melatonin for a little bit longer too, because I was like, oh, it's kind of just more like a supplement. Maybe it's just a placebo effect. You know, I ended up continuing the melatonin, and I think after that month where I had the nap, I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to wean off the melatonin and see how I'm doing, because I really felt like after that session, and I did like one other session after that too, like a follow up, I felt a little bit lighter. I don't know what it was. And so EMDR, it's interesting. When you hear it described, like my therapist, like, okay, some people use like a light bar. Other people will use like, you know, just follow my hand signals, right? And I'm like, is this hypnosis? Like, this sounds so wacky to me, right? And she's like, no, it's just, you know, it just sort of, I can't describe it because this is not like where I'm trained. But for her, what she did, and this was back when I was seeing her in person. This is pre-pandemic. So I would be in her office, and she would just basically have her hands going back and forth and say, follow my hands, you know, back and forth. And I want you to, like, you know, envision a safe place. And then she would bring up like a moment of trauma that we would sort of process together as I was still watching her hands kind of go like back and forth. And it's not hypnosis. Like I never felt like I was, you know, out of my body or like unconscious or like I didn't know what was going on. And we would talk about, like, before we start the session, how do you feel? Like, what are you on? Like, we would rate the scale. And then after the session, we would rate again, like, how do you feel now? So it was kind of just like, basically, I think you basically bring a piece of trauma to a moment that's safer and sort of rewrite the memory almost, so that you don't feel the same sorts of like threat that you used to feel before. So for me, there was a big trauma piece I really actually think I had to work through, that, you know, I'm really glad she suggested this as well. This therapist has been like so helpful to me. She was also an Asian therapist. And so I really felt like she brought a lot of tools for me. And another one was, she recommended this book to me. It was called Why We Sleep, by Matthew Walker, who's a PhD, like sleep scientist, trained at like Harvard. I think for a while he was like medically trained to be a doctor too, but ended up devoting his life to basically sleep research. And I wouldn't recommend this book to people who are currently having a lot more anxiety about the sleep, but it really goes into the science behind sleep, like why it's important. Why do we dream? You know, what's the purpose of certain like REM cycles versus non-REM cycles? And really what happens to your body when you don't sleep? Like, why is it so bad? Why does it affect mental health? Why is sleep so interconnected to your mental health? For me, I didn't read this book until after, like a lot later, maybe like a year or so later, because I kept remembering it, but I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to read this. And when I finally did, it was also part of my healing where I was like, oh my gosh, like that's why I wasn't feeling good. Like, you know, there was really a scientific reason behind why this stuff happened to me.
Instead of it being your fault, you know, because I think that was
I really wasn't. I really wasn't getting the sleep I needed to function. And sleep is one of those things that's like essential to life. There's a reason why sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and why were we talking about how like at some point after 48 hours of no sleep, your brain really is like offline, or like just something like,
I remember reading like even just at 24 hours, you are equivalent to someone who has a blood alcohol level of like 0.1%, which is isn't that usually above like the, if you get a DUI? So if you were driving while sleep deprived, you're more under the influence than if you were drinking.
Yeah. And that's what this book also talks about, how like, why are we not addressing the issues of lack of sleep in this country? Because people who are like very severely sleep deprived, who are driving on the roads, it's a public health danger to other people, because if you're not getting the sleep, it's almost like you're intoxicated.
Yeah.
And then, as you go up more and more. So I really think those 48 hours really was starting to sort of lose my mind a little bit. That's not like my fault. It's the fact that I really needed the sleep.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad we got to talk about all this, because I think it's just this other piece of your story that, as we saw from when you were on Rachel's podcast, so many moms were like, oh my goodness, I went through this. I needed to hear this. So I definitely want to make sure, like, we'll leave a bunch of information in our show notes on a little bit more about what EMDR is. I'm very familiar with it. I'm by no means, I'm not trained in it. You have to be trained in it. Like, it's a very gold standard for trauma. Like, lots of folks that have complex PTSD, EMDR is very effective. So that's a very good trauma treatment. CBT-I, we can again link some information, just general information on those two things, or anything else. The book, I think that Jasmine mentioned, we'll link that as well. And, I think, again, people go into having a baby, and the first thing people will always tell you is like, get sleep now. And, let's stop saying that to moms and dads and parents, like, because there's too much pressure, and it's already hard enough worrying about the baby's sleep and your sleep. So I think this really helps us name and put to light that it's really, really tough. And it's more than just, oh, I'm not sleeping, ha, ha, ha. It's, my brain is under duress if I'm not getting the sleep I need. So to anyone listening that is going through this, please know that you can seek help. And again, everyone's insomnia experience is different. So it doesn't mean you have to go out there and be like, well, I heard this person took these meds and did this, and this should work for me. It's going to be different for everyone, but please try to find your doctor or whoever you can.
I do want to disclaim that when I was taking most of my psych meds, I was not breastfeeding anymore because I had to stop. And not because of the medications. I had chosen to stop because I thought it would improve my mental health, and then it didn't. So that's another factor, is if you want, and I don't want it to deter you from thinking that you can take something for your sleep while you're breastfeeding. But I just did want to disclaim, like Peggy said, don't just go off to your doctor and say, I heard this person say this, I want to try these. For me, my situation was I was not breastfeeding at that time. So yeah, I'm hoping maybe we will be able to include a newsletter by the time this comes out too, because I think this has opened up something in me to want to write more as well. So hopefully we can link that as well. But yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about the sleep portion, because sleep is an integral part of mental health, and something that I think we just sort of like say lightly or casually, get some sleep, some sleep. That's all you need. Just get some sleep. But sometimes it's like, that's hard for me to do. It's not as easy as it seems, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, on that note, as always, like to wrap up with our mental health of the week. Maybe for both of us, it's good sleep hygiene. I don't know. What are you going to do for your mental health this week?
I thought of something that I did just the other night. My husband and I had sort of this little, like a mini argument about something where in the moment, I was like, okay, I almost just wanted to like snap back and like say something. But I mean, you can sort of hear I'm a little bit sick. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to waste my voice over this right now. And so I just took a step back and like took a breath, and I was like, okay, well, I'll address this later at another time when we are both not so mad at each other. And so I think that actually was a good call and a good step, because the following night I told him like, I want to talk about something, the thing that happened the other night, which was like in retrospect so tiny. It wasn't like a huge thing, but it was still sort of weighing on me that like these little things will keep coming up if I don't sort of at least address it and how I feel about it. So I, we were both in a much better mood at that time. We weren't threatened by each other. And I felt like that was a good moment to sort of communicate how I felt. And he asked me, well, okay, I hear you. And how would you like me to say it in the future? Or how can I say it in a better way in the future? And so there was good communication. Like I was like, okay, I'd like it if maybe you said this instead. Like that wouldn't make me as upset, and I think we would both benefit. And he was like, okay, cool, let's do it. So I was like, oh, I kind of like patted myself on the back and said, okay, like I took a pause. I realized we were in fight or flight mode, and I found a better time to discuss it. So that's my little thing for the week.
Oh, that's such a good example. I think we forget how much like tending to our relationships and working on our communication is a part of mental health and a part of self-care. Yeah. And I love that example. Gosh, I am trying to think of what I've been doing for mental health this week. I have so many books that I want to try to read that it could become stressful because you're like, now I want to read this, now I want to read that.
Yeah.
But as we've known from some of our other podcast episodes where we talked about self-care, I've been crocheting like mad recently, and I can't read while doing that. So I started doing audiobooks again.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm like listening to an audiobook while crocheting because I mean I could just sit and crochet and like do nothing, which is also very meditative, but I've been wanting to read, and I'm like, in this book that I've been wanting to read, like I couldn't get at the library because it's just like there's like a 22-week hold on it or whatever. But
oh my gosh.
But it's probably available as an audiobook. So I've been just doing audiobooks, and again, still working on the sweater that I'm trying to make, y'all.
Oh my gosh. It's looking good. It's coming together.
Thank you.
And look at you being like double productive. I'm reading a book while crocheting.
I know. Well, because I tried. Awesome. I actually tried to read a book while crocheting. I was like, I can't. I don't know those people there's people that I see online that are crocheting and they're like looking away. And I'm like, I have to look at my stitches. Like I'm going to miss stitch.
I was going to say, there's no way I would be able to do that either.
Because sometimes I'll crochet and then like watch my husband play video games, but then like just so that we have some quote unquote quality time, like we're in each other's presence. And sometimes he's like, do you want to watch me do this thing? I'm taking on this boss. I'm like, sure. But sometimes I'm like, I kind of want to like do something else with my brain. So then like listening to audiobooks while crocheting has been really kind of fun. So
reading is so good. And I'm sorry if I've been throwing a lot of books your way. Like this one's good, this one's good, this one's good.
I have a growing list, but now I know what's actually faster for me is audiobook. I'm clearly either I don't have time to read a book. So I think audiobooks has been now my thing. Because if you think about it, like taking a drive and listening to our podcast, taking a drive and listening to an audiobook. Oh my gosh, all this time where you could do things and read at the same time because it's just being read to you into your ears.
Right.
I don't know if it makes me feel like an old person being like, I'm listening to my stories, but it's a great way to get a book in, Yeah.
I think if more people, that will help more people read, then all the better, because I'm kind of the same. Well, no, I'm different in the way that I need to physically read the book because I like to let it marinate. Like the words, for me, my eyes on the words, I have to let it marinate. But you're right. You need to find the time to do that. It means you're not able to split your focus and do something else. So it does take me a while also to get through my reading list as well.
I mean, for this one, it's just like fiction. I feel like if I wanted to read something that wasn't fiction, I want to be able to like highlight or like take quotes down. But I feel like when it's fiction, it just feels like, like the stories.
That's probably why I have this issue, because I like to read like, self-help books or memoirs. And like, for me, I was like, oh, I need to like grasp every rich word, Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this. I think hopefully it will help another mom out there. And reach out to me if you guys need more commiseration or more resources.
Yeah. And most of you should already know by now, but if you want to find our Jasmine, it's at Pearls of Jasmine on Instagram. And then I think all your other links are there. And we can also put those in the show notes.
It's all there. Sure.
All right. Thank you.
We hope hope you have enjoyed Healing the Tigress and our conversations on maternal mental health in the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Please follow our show and our Instagram page to catch our latest episodes. We have so many fantastic guests and deep topics that we are so excited to cover soon.
If you enjoyed this episode or would like to support us more, please leave us a rating or a review and share this podcast with a friend to spread the word. Check out the show notes for more links. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope these conversations will help our AAPI mothers heal their inner tigress and honor their mental health as they deserve to. See you next time.